Some of the most intense debates about race, racism, immigration, and national identity have centered around a YouTube channel known as Sargon of Akkad, now recording and publishing videos under the name The Thinkery. Among the more bizarre digressions in this guy's history of recording and uploading content was his claim that he is himself 1/4 black. And when pushed on the claim, he has clarified that he has one grandfather, who was 100% African, not part African. Now, many people have been puzzled by this, and many people have simply ridiculed him for it. Not only has he appeared on camera himself, he's had both of his parents appear on camera, and none of them look like they're even 1/4 black. None of them look like they're an 1/8 or 16th black. And, by the way, should I even bother to mention, some members of my own family, some of my relations by marriage, are in that position of being just slightly of African ancestry. I'll put it that way. So, yeah, apart from the fact that I went to a high school that was about 50% black, I grew up in downtown Toronto around all kinds of black people, all kinds of people from the Caribbean who are of mixed European and black ancestry. To some extent, I'm in a position to know. We had the solution to the riddle in today's new video. His grandfather, his African grandfather, is a native of the island of St. Helena. Native, you say? The island of St. Helena, although it's considered part of the continent of Africa, is way out in the middle of the ocean with no connection to any continent at all. It is as close to the middle of nowhere as anything can be. And the indigenous population of St. Helena, when it was discovered by European explorers, was 0. Now, this island had a very interesting role in the transatlantic slave trade, in exploration and the European conquest of large parts of the world. And the main thing it's famous for is being the abode of Napoleon Bonaparte after he fell from power, his earthly prison. Today, doubtless, there are some black African people living there. I don't know the demographics, but obviously his quote-unquote African grandparent would in fact be an example of a white European, probably British, who was part of that empire, who was part of the colonization, who probably himself or his ancestors profited by the slave trade, by the shipping of slaves and maybe opium and some other terrible things the British Empire traded in. That's what it was. It was a hub of transoceanic intercontinental trade. And we have the solution to the riddle of how he's claimed. And he has used the term black. He doesn't just say African. He has claimed he is 1/4 black, sometimes clarified as 1/4 African. And yeah, in fact, he traces some of his ancestry to the island of St. Helena. He made the even more bizarre claim that his ancestor, his grandfather, chose to become British, chose to leave the island of St. Helena and embrace British culture and assimilate into British culture, which he is contrasting to the disparaging picture he paints of many immigrants today who move to England, but from his perspective, do not embrace British culture. So look, I have been an immigrant myself many, many times over. I'm now 40 years old, and I'm the product of several sequent migrations. And in some countries, you know what, maybe just in one country, I was really embraced. I was really accepted as part of that country. When I lived in Laos, I lived there for 2.5 years. I really put in a lot of effort to learn to speak the Laotian language. And I studied the history and politics at a job working inside the government, at a very, very low level, by the way, but nevertheless. And, there was a very strange and moving moment toward the end of my time there. And this wasn't the only moment, but this is the one where it was said literally. I had to go in and talk to somebody inside a hotel, and I stopped to talk to an old woman who was sitting on I don't know what she was sitting on. Sitting on a crate, I think, in front of this hotel, sitting on a box or something. There wasn't a bench or anything there. Anyway, and this woman, I didn't know if she was working in the hotel herself. So I was talking to her in Laotian, and she chatted with me for a little bit, and then I went in to ask inside the hotel. And the guy inside the hotel was very apprehensive to see me. I think it's because they were just in the middle of doing renovations, and he wasn't sure what was going on. And I started asking some questions. You could see he was really tense. And the old woman came in the door, and she said to him in Laos, she said, "Don't worry, it's fine. He's a white Lao." That was mind-blowing to me, that level of acceptance. And here's the other thing. The degree of acceptance, or perceived acceptance into that culture, after only, again, 2.5 years, but I was only working hard on it for a year and a half or something. And I didn't think I possibly could assimilate. It's a Southeast Asian culture, so on and so forth. When I was on the Thai border area, so Laos has a long border with Thailand, several times, Thai people were racist against me. I wish I was joking. This is not a joke. They were not racist against me because I was white. They were racist against me and shouted insults against me for being a white Lao, for being Laotian, for being a white person who had assimilated into Lao culture. Yeah, it was mind-blowing. Now, add something on it. Part of the puzzle here, partly it was because I was young and strong, and they wanted me. I know it sounds weird, but in terms of that culture, just weird. People would be like, "Oh, wow, he looks big and tough. He can carry a lot of firewood." There was this weird kind of appreciation. Just, you look big and rugged, we'll accept you into our tribe. Really, it was a kind of, tribe was peculiar. But the other issue was I was a scholar of the ancient religious language, so I could read and write Pali. And that gave me a certain status. I mentioned this to my girlfriend recently. But, several times people consulted me about ghosts, where they thought they had a ghost infestation, that there was a haunting problem. And they took even though I was a total foreigner, I was a white Canadian, they took my perspective on ghost problems seriously because they knew I could read Pali. I could read the ancient scriptural language of their religion. Of course, they can't. They speak Lao better than I ever will, but they don't know anything about Pali. And a lot of them have very limited literacy. So there are different elements to that. Now, right next door to Laos is Cambodia. Man. I don't have any words polite enough to express how I got along with Cambodian culture and how they got along with me. I mean, Jesus Christ. The kind of denigration, and it's even, even when I was delivering a lecture, it was a formal academic lecture I delivered on ancient Buddhism and Pali and that history and related stuff, and politics too, all wrapped up in one lecture. I remember when I delivered that lecture, even then, the attitude I got from Cambodians in the audience and who talked to me after, just this sneering contempt, to paraphrase, no, I think to quote verbatim stand-up comedian Chris Rock, the attitude I got from Cambodians was like, yeah, you think you're smart, you think you're tough, well, can you kick my ass? Like, really, I never could and never would, assimilate into Cambodian culture. It's right next door. I mean, the contrast is they're adjacent, tiny, poverty-stricken countries in Southeast Asia that I lived in for significant periods of time. Now, the lens, the frame that Sargon of Akkad, or the Thinkery, puts up against this issue is that he presumes anyone who chooses to go and live in another country or chooses to migrate to another country is choosing to assimilate into that country. And I think in a very simple sense, that's fundamentally wrong. Whether it was Laos, Cambodia, now Taiwan, or even when I made the decision within Canada to go to the area where our indigenous people live, the Cree and the Ojibwe, and to study their language and live with them, I was not choosing to assimilate into their culture. I did not imagine that I had something positive to offer them by imitating them. Just stay on that for a second. Does anyone in New York really value New York, London, Amsterdam? Doesn't matter. Okay, let's say Amsterdam. Does anyone in Amsterdam really need a Chinese person who moves to Amsterdam with the motivation to discard everything unique and distinctive about themselves and imitate and emulate the local culture? To become, and you can never do it. I can never be completely fluent in Laotian. I can never really share their perspective. Why would you value a second-rate foreign imitation of your culture as opposed to something different and distinctive and authentically alien that nevertheless has something positive to add to your culture? Like, let's keep it real simple. Oh, great, you came from China to Amsterdam and you opened a Chinese restaurant. You didn't try to open a Dutch restaurant. You didn't try to open a, you didn't try to open a second-rate imitation of, our cuisine. You brought your own cuisine. Okay, whatever. You came from China, you opened a Chinese antique shop, and you're a Chinese art dealer, and you're an expert in Chinese literature and culture. Okay, you have something distinctive you can bring. Whatever it is. These are really crude, really simple examples. When I came from Canada to Laos or from Canada to Cambodia, my feeling was, hey, I have something valuable to offer to your culture, being who I am in all my alienness and all my difference. When I went to live amongst the Cree and the Ojibwe at First Nations University, so by the way, this wasn't some remote village, it was in a university devoted to First Nations people, but they are significantly a different culture. Believe me, if you live in Saskatchewan, white European culture and First Nations culture are separate. They are separate and not equal. It's a very deep, very bitter racial and racist divide as a result of the history of the British Empire. I actually refused. I refused to go and attend pipe smoking ceremonies. I refused to sit in a tent and do the spiritual seances. I said to them, no, that's not who I am. I'm not here to imitate your culture. I'm not here to pretend to be a part of your culture. Like, I feel I have something valuable I can offer through, the study of language and history and politics. Max Stirner has a dictum. He says, people have this delusion. If only everyone wore one hat, nobody would have to take off their hat to one another. It's a little bit cryptic, I admit. But the idea is that by unifying people under one cultural identity or one nation, that then they're made equal and they don't have to take off their hat to another. And instead, the alternate approach is to say, no, we can recognize our mutual alienness. We can recognize our distinctness and our difference, and we can find value in that. We can find something worthwhile. We can make friendships that aren't based on a myth of unity and uniformity, but that are based on a real and pragmatic appreciation of our differences. And if we can't, we can't. Sargon of Akkad, you tell me. If you're not 1/4 black, if you're not 1/4 African, why have you made it a crutch in your career of pro-British Empire, transparently racist rhetoric to claim that you are? I can't think of any good reason why you would lie about that. Why is it that in your video, which I think clocks in at about 21 minutes in length, why is it that you only and repeatedly mention your feeling that London is now a city where the indigenous population are a minority, and you don't mention any other example from the history of the British Empire where the native people really became a minority in their own land? From Australia to Canada, your empire has a tremendous history of bloodshed on its hands. And it's for that reason that now, in the 21st century, you're not in the same position as Switzerland to say that you'd prefer to be an isolationist country. You inherit the legacy of the cosmopolitanism that you created and that you opposed upon others through wars that were fought for through wars that were fought for control of the slave trade and even worse, the trade in opium. One take, no edits.